Dead Cells is a beautiful, hectic, and highly addictive game, which only seems to slow down as the early levels fail to deliver a change in scenery. Even then, there are ways to make even the repetitive parts of the game a lot of fun. Dead Cells is created by French game studio Motion Twin, which until now has only made free-to-play online games. You play as a living organism, inhabiting several bodies, one for each time you die. You're presented with no past, present or future story-wise, and it's now up to you to find a way forward. Throughout your journey you'll come across certain bits of things related to the lore, but mostly it'll be up to you to figure out the story. Be sure to read anything new you find, even if you've already been through an area before though, as every level is randomly generated and you won't find everything in a single run. The player character is extremely well responding, and the movement is mostly fluid. Throughout your journey you'll unlock new abilities for your character, which you won't lose every time you die. That only counts for abilities though. If you pick up a blueprint for a new item and make it through the level, you get to keep that too. But for mostly everything else, it's break your face and the game will break your progress. You lose your life and it's game over, unless you've collected an extra life, appropriately called YOLO. You lose all progress you've made in your journey as well as what aspects you've upgraded, setting you back to zero and leaving you to start from the beginning. This would be a problem if it wasn't for the game's progression system, and then you keep what item blueprints and abilities you pick up through a level, as long as you make it to the end of the level. Die midway through, and you'll have to find it again in another run. Everything in Dead Cells is absolutely beautiful, Motion Twin nailing their use of pixel textures. Every enemy, attack animation, item, area and prop, it's created with depth and beauty, which is hard to find even in games today. The enemies are diverse and varied, each zone having its own range of foes and baddies to discover and fight. The game's soundtrack is just as fantastic as the game itself. I rarely find myself listening to soundtracks outside the games they were made for, but I couldn't help myself with this one. While the music for the early areas in the game, which you'll experience in most runs again and again, can get slightly repetitive and tiring to listen to, I'd rather have it than not at all. Speaking of the earlier stages, you're gonna become quite familiar with the starting zone quite quickly, as despite being randomly generated, you're always starting out in those familiar surroundings with the same music. However, should you tire of going through that area again and again, try speedrunning it. The game actually has special gates with extra rewards, which will lock after a certain amount of time has passed, strongly encouraging the player to have a go at speedrunning, despite me being a guy who likes to take my time. You can even get a temporary speed boost if you defeat a certain amount of enemies in a short amount of time, further boosting the speedrunning aspect of the game. Between each stage, the game gives you a break from the fighting and lets you relax in one of the passages before heading into the next zone. Here you can spend the cells you've picked up on purchasing new equipment from blueprints you've picked up in earlier stages you've cleared. It thankfully also allows you to replenish your health and healing items, because believe me when I say, you're gonna need it. Being a Castlevania-esque game, Dead Cells can be very hard at times, though rarely to the point of frustration. Usually when you end up dying, you know it was your fault, and you can work on a way to make sure it doesn't repeat itself. However, while the game runs nice and smooth at 60 FPS at most times, there was the occasional freeze, often resulting in me getting hurt by enemies or killed by traps. It still wasn't enough to discourage me from trying again though, and those freezes are only once per hour or so. In the end, Dead Cells is a game for most kinds of players, offering a ton of fun for a nice price. It's extremely well made in most aspects, and it's easy to feel the developers has poured a lot of love into this creation, even if it can feel like a sadistic lash on the back from time to time with its high difficulty. While I did experience the occasional freeze or bug, it was nothing bad enough for me to tire of it in the hours I spent playing the game.